if you don't want to be sort of recorded, then that's absolutely fine. You can keep your cameras off. It will be used as a post-training resource on our teaching partnership website for those individuals that can't attend. So just to make you aware of that, and recording has started now. If you can leave yourselves on mute, there will be a few occasions where I know there's quite a few people in this room, but I will get you to write things within the chat box, just in terms of a few questions that I have throughout this session, but we'll keep them quite short because we're obviously limited to an hour. Okay, I think that's all. The other thing that I've forgotten to mention is captions. If you require any captions, so subtitles, if you need any, 3 dots at the top of your screen. Okay, if you press onto that and press CC, you will be able to see that you can actually put on captions. They're not always accurate, and they will come out with some strange words, but if you need it, please put them on. Okay, so I was going to welcome someone to do the talk now, but it's myself. So I'm going to be presenting this hour-long session on coaching skills in social work. And I did something quite similar in Coventry Social Work Practice Week as well. But I've tweaked it a little bit in terms of covering social work. The last one was about supervisors. Just in terms of myself, I've told you a little bit about myself, but I'm also a level 5 ILM coach and mentor. So I qualified about 2 years ago in my substantive post in Walsall, and I've completed quite a lot of coaching with social workers. However, as a coach, I don't necessarily need to coach my own profession. I can coach any profession at all up to senior manager level. I'm no expert in coaching. I'm very new to coaching, but I think that it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I really want to share my learning with you because I think it's a fantastic approach and tool that all of you guys could use within the room today. Okay, so let's think about what we're going to be, let's go through what we're going to be looking at in today's session. So we're going to be looking at briefly what is coaching. So for those that you don't know what coaching is, we'll briefly look at that. I'm going to be looking at specifically a model that we use in coaching quite a lot. I know I use it, and it's one of my favourite models that I use, but we're going to go through the GROW model itself. We're going to look at how GROW can be implemented into practice, and then you can have a bit of time to think, actually, well, how can I actually implement this into the work that I do? We'll have a bit of reflective time throughout this session about thinking about what your current approach is in terms of working, either within the community out there with children, families, or vulnerable adults, or whatever field of work you're in, or maybe people that you supervise as a practice educator or as a manager, or as a senior practitioner, whatever your role is. And then we will have some time reflecting on our communication skills. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at today. So one of the first things I wanted to really start off with is when I talk about the GROW model, the G of the GROW actually stands for goal. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is, and if you want to type it into the chat, that's absolutely fine. And there's quite a few of you, but it would be nice to see what your goal is. So when you signed up to this session today, okay, what did you actually think that your goal would be from the session? So what would you like to achieve from the session today? So it'd be really nice if you could just type it in the chat box in terms of what is it that you wanted to achieve? What's your goal for today? And when we think about goals, okay, it's really important to think about goals in terms of SMART model. And I'm sure all of you are aware of the SMART model. So it's got to be specific. So the goal that you're writing in now, thinking about, is it specific? Is it measurable? Yeah. Is it achievable? Is it realistic? And is it timely? So all those things, when we think about our goal, that's really important. So we've got some comments here. That's great. So how to enhance my enabling others course I'm undertaking. Okay, great. And to gain some knowledge around this area, and I hope to start social work excellence. So we've got some people that are going to start their apprenticeships. Understanding use in practice, great. Better understanding of coaching skills and how to apply this to my practice. Yep, absolutely, we'll do that. Develop my skills to coach ASYEs from other social work teams. Okay, great. So just to let you know, to be a qualified coach, there is a course that you can complete, and it might be worthwhile just talking to your managers about this. So if after this session you feel that actually you're interested in coaching, there are ways of actually becoming a coach through some of the local authorities that you might be working in. It's not always accessible to all members, but you know that it's worth looking at and talking to your managers about. And then we've got improving my knowledge and supporting supervisees. Great. Okay. Excellent. So we've got some comments there that actually goals there that I think that you'll be able to meet today. So which is great. Okay. Understand relationship between social work and coaching. Okay. Yeah. That's fab. Okay. What makes a good skills coach? Okay. Great. So thank you for that. Okay, and we've got Lisa here who's on a refresher. She's a qualified accredited coach. Okay, great. Yeah. And it's really hard as a coach to try and keep your skills refreshed really, and trying to take any opportunity we can to try and coach. Okay, that's fab. So thank you for that. So in terms of goals, we've got our goal now. So we've got it in terms of what we want to achieve. Just moving on, if we think about the R of grow model, the R is what we say is reality. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about the goal, your specific goal itself, this in terms of, we're not going to go through your specific goal through the grow model, but in terms of reality, what I want you to think about now is that I want you to think about actually you as a practitioner, okay, in terms of whatever you do, okay, so in terms of maybe the work that you do with some families or adults or the people that you supervise, what kind of approach do you take, okay, majority of the time? So on this continuum, we've got one end which is directive, and I'll just explain to you what I mean by directive approach. So the directive approach is very much involves the input from you. So more of the input comes from you. You are the person that's, you know, providing the advice, the wisdom, the direction, and it's very based upon your personal experience or expert knowledge. So you're the expert in that when you're being directive. The non-directive approach, okay, this is the method that very much allows the person to lead their way, okay, to form their own conclusions, to problem solve themselves. And you, as the person that's working with them, you are listening to them and you're questioning them and you're gently guiding them to their own solutions. Okay, so just in the chat again, just thinking about what I've said, where are you on that spectrum? Okay, and you know, just to get a bit of an idea of where people are sat at, that would be great. Okay, so where are you in terms, are you directive, or are you non-directive, or are you somewhere in the middle? So if you can just put that in the chat. Okay, so we tend to flow between, okay, both, depending, okay, eventually ending on the non-directive, okay, somewhere in the middle, hopefully in the middle, okay, trying to move further to non-directive. Thank you for that honesty. Yeah, try to be non-directive. Yeah, yeah, again, trying to be non-directive depends on the work that we do. Great. So in terms of reflection, in terms of my approach, I would say that if you were to talk to me around 2 years ago, I was more towards the directive end. I was non-directive, but my autopilot was always directive. And with coaching, it changed my approach dramatically. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you today is because I know personally that coaching is very powerful, and if it's used correctly, it can be very powerful in terms of the work that you do with individuals. you know, hopefully today you will be able to understand how you can be maybe a little bit more non-directive. And there's different reasons why people sometimes feel more comfortable with having a more directive approach than a non-directive approach. But I do agree with what you guys are saying, that it does sometimes depend upon that situation. Okay. And we've got here, okay, about my role sometimes require absolutes, but I'm also a restorative, okay, restorative champion, so work with rather than to. Yes, excellent. So in terms of when we're talking about, let me just get back onto my PowerPoint. In terms of coaching, it's very similar. The underlying sort of ethos of coaching aligns a lot with things like restorative, so doing with instead of to or for or not. So it's in line with a lot of those approaches that we see out there in the local authorities at the moment. Okay. So just to give you a little bit of background then on what is coaching. So there's this great quote from John Whitmore, who is a pioneer in performance coaching in the business world. And coaching is used quite a lot in the business world, but that doesn't mean that coaching belongs to the business world. Coaching can be used in any sort of situation. It can be used in your professional and your personal world, to be honest. So coaching is very adaptable to different situations. The principles of coaching anyway. So just this quote here, coaching is unlocking a person's potential to maximize their own performance. It's helping them to learn rather than teaching them. And that's the word there in terms of teaching. We are not teaching when we are coaching. When we are being non-directive, we are helping and enabling, we aren't teaching. The teaching mode comes into someone that might be a mentor. So if you are using your own expertise, you are seen as a mentor. Whereas coaching is actually, you might not be an expert in that area, but you're supporting them in terms of their learning. Okay. Coaching is very much about supporting people to come to their own decisions, their own solutions, like I said. And what we do is, as coaches and as individuals, we will ask what we call effective questions. So questions that really allow people to think, to reflect, and really to come up with some of their own solutions that they require to move forward in terms of any change that needs to happen. And it's interesting because, you know, many of us that come into the social work world, if we ask people, why have you come into social work? You know, people say, because I want to help people. But what does helping mean? Okay. And I think we have to change our understanding of what helping means. Helping doesn't necessarily mean, you know, the first thing that comes into my head is that you do something for someone, you're helping them. But it doesn't necessarily mean that actually it's doing something for someone. Okay, it's about how can we enable and empower the individuals that we work with, those children, those families, those adults, those vulnerable individuals that we work with in the community, to actually find sort of within themselves the solutions that they require. Because what we know is within social work, within the world, and we all, if we actually say to someone, actually, you need to do this, okay, this is the solution to your problem, it is very unlikely for change to take place. Okay, very unlikely for it to take place. So if it comes from that individual, it is more likely to take place. And we have to really be aware of as well as social workers that there are other contributing factors to prevent people from changing. But actually, if we just allow people to start thinking for themselves and empowering them to think for themselves, actually that's the step in the right direction. Okay. And actually, just on my notes that I was just reading, and we touched upon this before, just to sort of let you know that, you know, coaching is an approach, it's a style of working, and it fits in with a lot of the models and approaches that are now being used in different local authorities. I come from a restorative local authority. Coaching, the style fits in very well with restorative. You know, you've got signs of safety, all those strengths-based approaches and tools that we use out there. You know, coaching is great to use as part of that approach and tool. Okay. So just moving on. So I thought what I'd do was I would go through the particular model that is very common within the coaching world. Okay. So it's called the GROW model. Okay. So the GROW model is very much a non-directive model. It's a non-directive approach. The person is the expert, and your role as a person that's working with that individual or is out there in the community, or you're supervising that individual, actually the person is an expert. Your role is to listen and use effective questions. Okay, and there's always going to be times where actually you need to be a little bit directive, but within GROW essentially it's very much about you being the listener and using effective questions. The GROW model was actually first published by Sir John Whitmore, and was published in 1992. And again, it was very focused on people within the business world. And what was found actually was that within this book, it talks about when a coaching style is used with individuals, okay, so people that you're supervising or working with, they become more productive and they become more creative. And it's still used within a lot of organisations, including in a lot of local authorities. Okay. So what I thought I'd do, I'd go through the GROW model itself and maybe use an example for you so it makes sense in terms of practice. And I'm going to use my own example. So I'm going to do a bit of coaching on myself here. Okay. So the G in GROW model is the goal. So we have to think about, well, what are the goals that we want to achieve? What is it specific that I want to achieve? And I have to think about, it's got to be smart. It's got to be very specific, my goal. And my goal for today's session is actually, I want to have more time away from my laptop. Okay, because I'm working from home at the moment. So, and I think we can all relate to this, being in front of the laptop for long periods of time. So I want to have more time away from my laptop. Is it specific? Yes. Is it realistic? I think it is. I can measure it, definitely. Yeah. So let's move on to the reality. So what is the reality now? How close am I to my goal in terms of having more time away from my laptop during the day? The reality now for me is that I spend a lot of time in front of my laptop, and even though my team are very supportive and say have time away from your laptop, I think it's something that I sort of prevent myself from doing. I might go and grab a cup of tea, but then I'm straight back. I might say to myself, oh, okay, I'm going to reply to this email and then I'll have a bit of a walk around the house, or I'll go into the garden, but it just never happens. I'm not having essentially sometimes breaks between my meetings. So actually, I'm quite far away from my goal at the moment. Okay, but that is the reality of my situation. And actually, you know, what's happening is that I'm feeling tired. I sometimes get headaches, and I've got a bit of a bad back. So no great picture of my reality at the moment. So let's move into the options. So what are my options, okay, in terms of moving forward with this specific goal? My options are actually that one of the things that I've thought about doing is to ensure that I don't have back-to-back meetings. And sometimes I think that I can avoid it, but I don't avoid it. So I think I need to be really strict with myself in terms of that, so having that time between meetings. Secondly, I think maybe I just say to myself after 30 to 45 minutes, I just have a walk away from my laptop, and I maybe even get a family member who might be in the house that day just to prompt me. So I think I could definitely do those two things. Or even the other thing that I could probably do is maybe set a timer, but that might be a little bit annoying for me that I set a timer on my phone. So there's a few options there that I've got to maybe come closer to my goal. But if I was to be specifically picking out what I think that would be realistic for me to do is booking that time between my meetings, and I would say 45 minutes, to work 45 minutes and then have time away from my laptop. That would be quite realistic for me. And I'm sort of going into the way forward here. So my way forward is what I need to do is I need to do what I'm saying. And if I'm not doing it, then I need to think about, well, if I don't do this, what's going to happen? If I don't do this, actually, I'm going to be feeling groggy. I'm going to have headaches. I'm going to have a bad back. Okay, I'm going to be really tired at the end of the day. So I need to remind myself of the consequences of not going forward with this goal. Okay. And when does it need to be done by? Well, I actually need to start it today. I need to do it now. And is it realistic? Yes, it is realistic. And I think that actually I can start it today. So, and committed on a commitment level, I think I'm 10 out of 10. So actually my way forward, and do I need any help with this? Well, no, actually I don't, because I do get still a lot of encouragement from my team and my family to have time away. So I think maybe if I just ask them to keep encouraging me, that would be great. So I've worked my way through, I've done a bit of self-coaching now. I'm sort of talking to myself and self-coaching, but it was just to give you an example of how the GROW model works, okay, in terms of actual something that needs to be changed, okay. And in terms of this GROW model, what I do is I don't necessarily use it in terms of exactly the way it is. Sometimes I might be in a conversation with someone and they might be saying to me that, oh, for example, I'm really struggling in terms of I keep being late for these meetings, and it's people are getting upset with me. So actually what you're getting there is an issue there that needs to change. So actually then, you know, they're talking about the reality of the situation, and then you could be saying, actually, so what is it that you want to do? What is your goal? What do you want to change? And so you could use it as a bit of a framework, which I generally do in quite a lot of conversations that I have, and I often have it in my head to structure conversations. So that, just in brief, is the GROW model. Which I think is fantastic, and it's something that you can really practice using in your day-to-day work. Okay, there'll be some time for questions at the end. I'm just conscious that I'll get through these slides and then we can have a bit of a conversation. So I'm going on about this amazing GROW model, but why is it beneficial? Why is the GROW model beneficial? So what we know is non-directive, okay? And what we know is actually, if we're directive, what happens is there's a very surface level learning. We're less creative. Actually, the person that you might be working with might be disempowered. Change isn't sustained. And all of us in the world of social work, we want change to be sustained. Yeah, we don't want short-term change. We want it to be sustained. And like I said before, I know there's other contributing factors that can impact upon sustained change. But again, this is in the right direction if we start using this type of approach to increase someone's independence and for them not to be dependent upon you. Because the worst thing that can happen is that you sort of leave that family, and actually everything, all the issues that were there before you came, come about again, because actually you're not there to provide them with the answers or direction. Or it might be, actually, I've had experiences working aside a number of managers where they've been actually quite directive team managers. And as soon as that manager leaves, that team is in turmoil because they're like, where's my direction? I need direction because my manager's always given me direction. And actually what that happens is it creates that codependency. You want staff to think for themselves. You want people that you work with out there in the community to also be able to do that to the best of their ability. Okay, so what we know is it unlocks people's potential. It brings out the best in people. Okay, there's a deeper level of learning. It's not just surface level learning, like I said. Okay, it's about allowing people to step back, to reflect, to think about things on a deeper level. It builds self-awareness. It allows you to reflect on things, to have that time, to look at your strengths and really think about, what is it that I need to change? What is it that I need to develop? What is it that I need to do? Really raising that self-awareness. Sustained change, like I've said before, because the change is coming from within them, and it's not something that you are imposing upon them. You're not saying that you need to do this to change. It's coming from within them, and hopefully that will create a little bit more of a long-lasting change. Okay. And there's increased creativity and flexibility, allows you to think outside the box. So when you use a coaching style, it really allows people to think outside their normal box, and to come up with ideas and solutions that maybe they've never really thought about before. And what we know is within terms of staffing, it really improves performance. So if we are a manager or supervisor that has a coaching style of working with staff members, there's research out there to say that improves performance. Okay, and again, we talked about increase in independence. Okay, so just moving on to the next slide. Right. So I have to keep drinking because my mouth is going dry. So what's really important in terms of coaching is it's not just things like the GROW model. Without certain things like listening and questioning, coaching cannot happen, okay, effectively. It just can't happen. And with the GROW model, you know, and any kind of coaching model, one of the key things we need to do is listen. So my question for you guys, and you don't need to put anything in the chat box, just something to reflect on. Think about the last question, conversation that you had, okay? And I want you to think about this question. Did you listen with the intent to understand? Or did you listen with the intent to reply? Okay. So just have a think about that. Because if you were listening with the intent to reply, you weren't actually listening. Okay. In order to really listen, really understand, we have to listen with the intent to really understand and be present. And that's not easy. It's a difficult skill to learn, and I'm still learning that as I go along, and I think that hopefully I'm getting a lot better, but I think it's key in terms of the work that we do out there in social work. We need to really learn to be present and to be listening and not thinking about, actually, I need to ask this question, I need to ask this question, because actually we're missing things from that conversation if we keep doing that. And so listening is important because it enables us to a number of things, okay? To understand the person that we're talking to, understanding their needs, understanding their concerns. And in order to listen to them and listen to them hard, what happens is that when we do that, we really do identify concerns, issues and motivation, and a sense of their motivation that we would never really establish if we didn't actually listen properly. So really learning to listen, you can find out so much more about a person and have an understanding of that person. And what we know is if someone listens to me, I know that actually I'm able to form a better relationship with them. I know that actually they're valuing me and they're valuing what I'm saying because they're really being attentive towards me. So that's very powerful. You know, the listening will create that connection, and those connections are so important in terms of the work that we do, and connections are relationships. And you know, coming from a restorative local authority, we talk a lot about connections and relationships. So actually listening is so important. And if we listen to someone, it builds their confidence and their self-esteem, which is what we want. The next part about questioning is something that I know, you know, lots of people do struggle with, and, you know, I struggle with it on occasions, but it's really, really important. Tolerating silence. How many of us here today can say that actually they can tolerate a bit of silence? How many of us today can say that actually they don't fill in a gap? Okay. Silence is really powerful. And I'm not saying to you guys to sit there 10 minutes or 15 minutes in complete silence, but just to sometimes have a little bit of silence after someone has spoken, okay? Just a few moments, because actually that silence, if you don't fill it, actually that other person ends up saying something else, that actually they may not have said if you didn't give them that time for silence. Okay. And all this contributes to active listening. And, you know, those sort of, in terms of silent times, it is about knowing the individual that you're working with, understanding their hearing styles, understanding their moods around, you know, silence and so forth. But it's very much a good way of just giving people time to think and reflect, and be in the moment. So don't always be in a rush to ask the next question, or to continue a conversation without just giving a bit of time for silence. Okay. So what time are we on? Okay, so we're good for time. So what I'd like you to do now is, I've got a little bit of an exercise for you. And yes, this is a very cute dog, and I love the way that he's listening, and you can tell he's listening by because he's putting his face to one side, like this, head to one side, so it's quite cute. But in terms of listening, I'm gonna read you a little bit of a story now. Okay, so I want you to be present, and I think that if you feel that you're not present, one of the things that I tend to do is I tend to just take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath and just allow yourself to not be distracted by your emails or anything else around you. Just be present, because that's the time when our listening is so much better. Okay, so what I want you to do is, I don't want you to take any notes, I just want you to listen, and then I'm going to ask you a few questions at the end. Okay, so last week I went for a lovely walk in Cannock Chase. Now when I did this before, I also talked about Cannock Chase, but it was a different story. Okay, but I went for another walk in Cannock Chase on my day off, and I went with my friend and his dog. Okay, and his dog didn't look anything like this. It's a Rottweiler, and he looks quite vicious, but he's not vicious. He's actually quite lovely towards human beings, that is, but he absolutely hates other dogs. So every single time we were walking past other dogs, he was barking. Oh my gosh. But a few times actually he was pretty well behaved, so both myself and my friend were quite proud of him. And his dog's name is Creed. And we walked for about 2 hours, and you know, time always passes very, very quick when you're with friends, because you're talking and so forth and catching up. But it flew by. But when we were walking through Cannock Chase, we came across a herd of deer. Now, last time I went, I saw a stag. So actually, I feel pretty blessed that I've seen these beautiful animals in Cannock Chase. And what made me even more happy was just to see them so happy and free out there and just enjoying themselves. And it was the highlight of my day, like it was the highlight of my day when I saw the stag. And I'm looking forward to actually visiting again. And I think I might go to that part of the actual chase, because I think that's where the deers hang out. So I'm looking forward to seeing more deer, and hopefully a better behaved Creed. Okay, so just in terms of sorry, that's come off. Just in terms of coming back to some questions now, I want you to just think about what I've spoken about, okay? And I want you to tell me, even a few notes. Oh, okay, so sorry. Okay, so sorry, I've just seen the message from Adam to say that there's a few hands up. So what I'll do is I'll come to them in a second, if that's okay, Adam. Sorry, I didn't see that because I was between two screens. So in terms of the listening activity, so I want you to think about what helped you to listen, okay? What helped you to be in the moment, okay? Did you feel like asking me any questions when I was speaking? Okay. Was there anything that distracted you? Was it challenging? And if so, why was it challenging? And how do you think that you could improve your listening skills? So I just want you to think about that. And just maybe, if a few of you just want to write down anything within the chat that I could just, any one of those questions that I've just asked about the listening activity. any comments in the chat, that would be great. Anything? Okay, so Amelia, thank you. Said I've tried to consciously look at your eyes. Okay, were you looking at my eyes? Okay, to avoid myself being distracted. I'm sorry I couldn't see you, so I couldn't look at you. I always long to take notes. Yes, it's one of those things, isn't it? As social workers, we love taking notes. I wanted to ask about the herd of deer and exactly where it was. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it was a relaxing story. I hope I didn't put you to sleep. Okay. But that's great. It was interesting. Pictured what you were saying. The familiar spot of Cannock Chase and seeing, yeah. Cute dog. Oh yes, he's lovely, isn't he? He's a lovely dog. I don't know whether it's a girl or a boy. Okay. I was struggling to get past the puppy. Okay, so the visual distracted people there, didn't it? Okay. I was able to listen, but I was being distracted and I wanted to take notes. I also try to control my expressions because I am not a fan of dogs. Okay. Yes, it's a big Rottweiler, I tell you, but it's beautiful. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Oh, was your dog barking, Christine? Oh my gosh. It must have sensed that I was talking about dogs. Great. Okay. Oh, it's a German Shepherd. Okay, lovely. Okay, great. So it's just about you thinking about the importance. That activity was very much about thinking about, and if we were face to face, I would have done a little bit more around that, and I would have done an activity between yourselves as well in pairs. But it's really just to get you thinking about how important listening is and how important actually we just need to stay in the moment. Just to really hear what people are saying, to listen to their emotions, to really think about and picture what their world is like. And you know, a lot of people said to me, I can really, you know, visualize you. That actually, yeah, that's the whole point. If you listen, if you really listen, you do tend to start visualizing actually, you know, what did it look like, what did it feel like for that person, what were the emotions of that person, and so forth. So lots of different things can come about listening. Okay, so what I'll do is actually I'm going to wait for the questions at the end, Adam, because if I get through this first of all, otherwise I might not be able to finish. So I'll just continue. But the next slide I'm going to look at is on questioning. So if I go on to questioning is really important. Actually, some of the comment there that I briefly saw about child protection might be covered in here. And what we're saying in terms of when we're working with, because I'm from a child protection background, so when I'm working with now students, ASYs and social workers, and I'm maybe talking to them about coaching, you know, I say, actually, yes, you have to be directive in certain situations. You know, we have to be a social worker. Sometimes we have to do things to individuals, but actually we don't have to do that 100% of the time. We can be non-directive. We can take time to ask those non-directive questions. And one of the things that people say to me is, actually, if we're being non-directive, we're not being challenging. I disagree. You know, we can be challenging through the questions that we're asking in a non-directive way. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. But just in terms of questioning, so the questioning is so important in terms of coaching. So how we listen and how we respond in terms of questions. And there's a model that we follow called the question funnel, and I'll show you a diagram of that, and you'll get these slides afterwards, so you can have a look at it. But we start off with very open questions, and then we get to find out the facts, we find out the motivation. And these open questions that we use, and you guys will be familiar with this, is the what, when, who, how, where, and so forth. And then it goes on to look at options. So in order for us to explore options, we can start using hypothetical questions. So it might be things like, actually, what if you could make that decision by yourself? What would you do? How would you solve it? If a friend came to you with that same issue, what advice would you give them? So some of those hypothetical questions can be really, really great to use. And then you would end with closed questions. I'm just going to hurry up a little bit here because I'm just conscious of time. That's just a little diagram of the question funnel. Again, here we've got some examples of questioning that is really great to use in terms of open-ended questions. I won't spend too long on that because these will be sent out to you guys anyway. So we're talking a bit about challenge here. Okay, so when I just talked about the child protection stuff, it is about challenge. And actually, yes, we do challenge. And it's not about holding back, but it's the same time where it states it's not about destroying the relationship. And some people say, oh, it's non-direct, conversations are airy-fairy. No, actually, it's about how do we provide a question that challenges individuals in a non-directive way, okay? And I like this sentence here where it says, if we never rock the boat, it just becomes another nice chat. And actually in the work that we do, we can't have another nice chat. It's about actually having those challenging conversations, but in a constructive way. One of the things that we tend to do within coaching is when we're listening, we really listen out for things that are contradictory. So if they contradict themselves in a conversation, then actually you can pull that out and then say, actually, well, you're saying this, but you've said this. Can you tell me more about that? So those are some of the things that we can use to challenge, which we need to do in our role. The other powerful thing that we need to think about in terms of coaching is accountability. And it's the most powerful aspect of this model. And actually, we need to hold people to account. So if they haven't done something, if something hasn't happened, what do we do? How do we hold them to account? And we know that actually if we hold people to account, it states here 95% of chance of achieving objective if you hold people to account. So really think about actually, how am I holding people to account? Am I holding people to account? Or if I'm not, how can I? And in terms of the other thing that I just briefly wanted to speak to you about was in terms of understanding how we effectively communicate with others. You probably are aware of this, but actually our body language is 55% of our communication, and our tone of our voice, the volume of our voice, the cadence and so forth, it's much lower, but still very powerful in terms of when we talk. So really thinking about when we're working with others is about our body language. How do we present? We need to really think about culturally as well. Sometimes other cultures will see one piece of body language as not being very polite. So being aware of all these things is really important. Okay. So lastly, the other part that I wanted to speak about was around a model on it's called the Circle of Control and Influence, and it's by Stephen Covey, and he really talks about actually when we work with individuals and there are issues and there are things that they can't really break through and they can't resolve, is really thinking about, well, where does it lie in this circle of control? Okay, is it something that's out of their control? So things, for example, here, this is very Americanized, but things like the price of fuel, things about, other people's behavior and actions, those are all things that are out of our control. We haven't got any control on that. But what is it that we can influence and maybe change a little bit? So that's very much about the circle of influence, to focus ourselves on actually the things that we can control and influence rather than the things that we can't control and influence. Okay. Okay, so just in terms of us being non-directive, I just wanted to have a little bit of time and then we can go to questions as well about what we think prevents us from being non-directive. So what is it that you think prevents you from being non-directive? And you can speak out loud here or you can write in the chat. Sorry, I was just shouting at my family then for making a noise. So is there anything that stops you from being non-directive? Time constraints, okay, yeah, time pressures, frustration, okay, okay. A fear that I will be asked a question I don't know the answer to. Okay, so coaching is very much about not answering the question, Kester. So actually it's about how can we support people to find out that question? Habits of being directive, yeah, definitely. Statutory requirements, yeah, definitely. So there's certain things, like I said, we need to do and we need to be directive. But there are times when we can be non-directive. Great. So some of the things that I sort of came up with in terms of directive, why people may be directive, it might be time, it might be culture of the organisation, it might be wanting to control the situation. We like to be in control, don't we, as social workers? And sometimes we think that we know best. Okay. So we're on the last slide now in terms of looking at a way forward. So I'm going to leave that slide there for you guys because it's something for you to really reflect on now. Okay, you've heard in a nutshell what coaching is. I know it's been like a really quick tour through coaching and the GROW model. So I apologise if I've been speaking quite fast because I was just conscious about getting through things. But I just want you to think about now. I want you to think about actually what are you going to be taking away from today? How are you going to be using things in practice? How are you going to be using this approach in practice? Is there any support that you will need? And when will you do this? So the last stage of the GROW model is very much about what your options are and the way forward. So I'm going to leave that with you guys now, and I've got a few minutes to answer some questions if people have any questions. Okay, so I don't know whether anyone's been, Rachel or Adam, have you been keeping track of any questions within the chat that I need to go back to?
I must admit I haven't, because I was just looking up the survey. So let me just scroll back through. I think, to be honest, you've been dealing with them as they've been going along because it's been responses to your questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Okay, who's that?
Raised my hand.
Who's that? Linus, is it?
Yes, Linus. Yeah.
Linus. Hello, Linus.
Yeah, hello there. Thank you very much for that presentation. Timely for myself because I'm a practice educator, but I've been asked to do some skills coaching for the apprenticeship. Now I'm thinking, how do I differentiate coaching from practice educator? Because you find that what is happening is that although I hold this role, I've got students who I'll be practicing educating, but at the same time, apprenticeship. Now, when you transfer from a PE in your sort of mindset, I'm thinking there might be a danger of crossovers in terms of your PE skills into the coaching skills. So what is the boundary? That's what I really want to.
Okay, so I think one of the things that I would say is that practice education and coaching don't have to be two separate things. I think coaching can be part of your practice educator role. So for example, when we're so I'm a practice educator. So when I'm practice educating a student, okay, there will be times when I'm asking quite open questions in terms of establishing their learning, okay, in terms of their understanding. But there might be times when actually I'm quite directive. It just depends on the situation. So I don't think it has to be two separate things. I think it can be something that you can actually bring into practice education. So what you find is that sometimes when you start off practice educating a student and you're, say, even supervising a student, you might be quite directive at the beginning. But actually what you want to do is you want to ensure that actually they become independent, that they can think for themselves and so forth. So that's when you would bring in that coaching style of actually, you know, asking them those open questions and really getting an understanding of what their understanding is, but also enabling them in terms of their journey. So I don't know.
I've got a case where I've got a student. I'll be doing a skills coaching, but he's got a practice educator. So can you see this? So there are two roles there from different individuals.
Right.
Now, how do you avoid that crossing over so that the other practice educator doesn't think you're taking over or something?
Okay, so there's two people, two different people
Yeah,
in terms of this.
Yeah, so we've got a student who's doing apprenticeships, and then as a practice educator, I've been asked to skill coach this person, but he's got a practice educator at the same time.
I think that's fine. I think that, you know, it depends on what style that practice educator. So maybe it's a conversation that you have with that practice educator in terms of what approach that they're using.
Okay.
And actually, it's
yeah,
if you use a coaching approach within when you're doing your skills coaching, that's absolutely fine. I don't think that there's a limit to this.
Sorry, I need to have a conversation with the
have a look at the approach that they're taking, but I don't think there's, you know, there's not a limit to coaching style. I think it can be used in conjunction with, you know, within whatever role that you're doing. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you. Good point. Thanks.
So I just want to come to some of the questions that we're here.
Christine's got a hand up, Sukhvir.
Who, sorry?
Christine.
Okay, Christine, yeah, come through and then I'll answer some of the other questions.
Yeah, mine's just a very quick question, really. I just wanted to know where you did your training and whether you'd recommend it, because I'm looking obviously for our organisation, not just for myself.
Yeah, no, definitely. I would definitely recommend it. It changed really the way I work dramatically, to be honest with you. And I think it's such a powerful skill to have. So I did it. I did an ILM course, which was actually, if you, and I think Dudley is part of actually the coaching and mentoring pool, Christine. So if you go to your HR and ask them who the coaching lead is, and they should be able to direct you. So there should be someone within your, but I can send you some details, Christine, afterwards if you want me to.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay, I'll write a note for myself so I remember. Okay, great. So just in terms of Gurpreet, I've got your scared the person I'm supporting cannot be taught this way without consequences to service users. Gurpreet, do you just want to, I think Gurpreet might have gone. Okay.
I'm still here.
Oh, Gurpreet, hello. So do you just want to expand on that for me?
I guess if you're talking about the directive and non-directive, obviously with the non-directive, you're enabling somebody to grow, but sometimes that approach, as much as you might use it in supervision, when you leave somebody to be autonomous, it doesn't always work out the way that they kind of planned. And despite all the goals, you know, sometimes you may have problems where certain, I guess, you know, tasks aren't then completed, which then has a knock-on effect on service users. So that's what I was kind of getting towards there.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that we never, ever sort of, you know, sort of, in terms of if something needs to be done, we don't want our service users to be at risk. Yeah, we don't want the children, families and adults that we work with at risk. So if something needs to happen and they're not doing that, yes, you need to be directive. But I think it's coming back to actually those conversations that you've had with that individual, those non-directive individual, and actually going through those conversations again and having those reflection periods where you're actually exploring why that didn't happen. You know, what were some of the barriers? What is it that actually you need in order for yourself to actually do this next time? Is there any support that you require? Is this something that I need to say to you differently? So it's really always coming back and revisiting those issues. So if you've said something, if you had those non-directed questions, they've come up with a plan, it's not happened, it's about always revisiting those. But obviously if something needs to be done, it's not about waiting. It's obviously you have to be directive in some situations, but I think it's always about revisiting in Gurpreet. And essentially, if we're working with students, if we're working with social workers, actually we need them to be able to do things themselves. So then I would be questioning, actually, is this person capable? You know, these are some of the questions that we have to ask in terms of practice, don't we? So I think it's about, yes, being directive when you need to be, but coming back to revisiting some of those conversations that you've had. Okay, so I'm just going to look at one or two more questions because I'm just conscious of time. If you don't know, just say What do you think? I'd like to hear your views. Yeah, so I'd like to hear your views. Yeah, that's great. So, you know, it's about, you know, what is it that you think it is? How do you think that you'll be able to find out this information? What support do you need? So it's just asking all those open questions. Okay, I'm just going through to see if there's, I have to go now. So I think a few people have had to go. Fearing that I will be asked a question that I don't know. I think that person's gone again, but again, sometimes you don't know the answer, and it's about, well, about enabling that person to find out that question. Okay, so great. I think that's come to an end. 2:30 on the dot. I hope you enjoyed that session, and thank you for your contributions. So yeah, so have a great afternoon, and hopefully see you all soon at some point. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I just didn't get a chance to mention, I've put a link to our survey in the chat.
Evaluation. Please, 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 please complete the evaluation. It's really important for us to get feedback. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.